Hi, this is Mrs. Bustamante. We're going to talk about kind of the last big step of cellular respiration when we have oxygen present, which is the electron transport chain. So the electron transport chain is going to come after the Krebs cycle. So we went through glycolysis in the cytoplasm, then we went through the Krebs cycle. We're now in the mitochondria, in the mitochondrial matrix, and now we're going to enter the electron transport chain. We're still in the mitochondria. We're going to be in a little different place we'll talk about in just a second. But this is where we're going to make a ton of ATP, right? And this is a process that we have to have oxygen in order to do. So we have to have oxygen in order to make a lot of this ATP, which is why we talk a lot about organisms needing to take in oxygen in one way or another. So where is this happening? Well, I told you we're in the mitochondrial matrix. It's really going to happen, though, in what we call the inner membrane. Okay, so here's our mitochondria. We had our outer membrane. This is the kind of like loopy sloopy thing, moves back and forth, and here's our matrix. So we're doing in this twisty part that has a big surface area. And when you look at it, it looks a lot like some other membranes we've looked at, like the cell membrane or the membrane in the cytoplasm we were looking at when we did the light reactions, the electron transport chain and the light reactions of photosynthesis. They all look very similar because they kind of follow a same process. So the point of the electron transport chain is to use some high energy electrons that we're going to find in NADH and FADH2. And remember, we got those from the Krebs cycle. And their goal is going to be to use these electrons to move protons or to move hydrogen ions into the inner membrane space. Basically, we're going to build up a really high concentration gradient there so that we can use them to move through ATP synthase, which we saw in photosynthesis, and take ADP and make ATP for the cell. The other part of this that we'll notice is during this electron transport chain, we're going to use oxygen as kind of our final electron receptor, and we're going to give off water. So this is the part where we give off water when we're talking about cellular respiration. So let's walk through this in a little bit of steps. These are just proteins. In the membrane that we use as part of the electron transport chain. So we have NADH. Remember we made NADH in our Krebs cycle? We're going to use its electron. It's going to push hydrogen ions from the matrix into the inner membrane space. As it moves through, the electrons lose some energy. They're going to bond with oxygen and give us water. And notice we've built up hydrogen here. FADH2 is going to do the same thing. It provides electrons to move through the electron transport chain. They're going to meet with oxygen at the end and form water, and as they do that, they push hydrogen ions through. Then the last part of our electron transport chain is we're going to take those hydrogen ions that have a high concentration. We say we have lots of hydrogen ions in our inner membrane space compared to our mitochondrial matrix, and we're going to push those hydrogen ions through our ATP synthase, and when they do that, we're going to take ADP and we're going to turn it into ATP. And this is really why we call the mitochondria the powerhouse of the cell, because this is where we're making lots and lots and lots of our ATP when we go to do our tally here in a second. If you're in class, we're going to walk through this animation a lot. I'll post the animation so you can see it and walk through it yourself. It's really helpful too. So here's our summary of the electron transport chain. We get 34 ATP typically, and we get water. This occurs in our inner mitochondrial membrane, this part that's folded back and forth a lot, and we use that NAD plus and FAD plus to accept electrons from glucose. NADH will give us 3 ATPs, FADH2, 2 ATPs. I'm not too concerned that you can count those as you move through. I should say one thing, we have NADH, it's going to change into NAD plus, and FADH2 will change into FAD, just so you know. So here's our overall pathway. We took in glucose through glycolysis. We gave off some ATP. That glucose moved through the Krebs cycle. We gave off some more ATP. We also gave off carbon dioxide. It went to the electron transport chain. We gave off ATP and we gave off water. And we get about 36 ATPs from this process. And remember, the electron transport chain really requires energy. Later, we're going to talk about fermentation if we don't have oxygen present. Here's another way to look at it. It'll actually count your molecules kind of as you go through. We have glucose enters glycolysis through the pyruvic acid. In the Krebs cycle, we give off some carbon dioxide. We give off some ATP. In the electron transport chain, we take in oxygen, we give off water, and we get a lot of ATP. Just a nice picture to show you. So when we do our ATP tally, glycolysis gave us 2, the Krebs cycle gave us 2 ATP. The electron transport chain can give us up to 34 ATP. That means we get a little bit of a range anywhere from 36 to 38 ATP. You don't have to know why we get a range right now. We'll talk about that in some of our higher biology classes. You just need to know that sometimes it can vary a little bit. This is another way to summarize cellular respiration. We had glucose and oxygen. It went through glycolysis. Then we went through the Krebs cycle. Then we went to the electron transport chain. And out our final products were carbon dioxide and water. So when we were highlighting our reactants of cellular respiration and our products of cellular respiration here.